Before I can tell you that story, I gotta tell you how I got in the film business. Hi, I'm Valerie. I was a key set costumer on Gilmore Girls, and how did I get to be a costumer on that show? Well, the short story is I got a phone call. The long story is, back when I was in high school, my drama teacher's husband, his name was John Hill, was a stage manager for television shows like Arsenio Hall, Brother, the Oscars, the Emmys, basically anything live TV, and I think he ended his career on American Idol. Anytime there was an opportunity for the kids to become audience members, we would, so we could raise money for our school program. And while we were watching those programs shoot, I was enamored with, I want to get in the film business. So I kept in touch with my drama teacher and her husband, and they basically said, whoever you meet, keep in touch with them. The business is all about connection. You don't have to go to college, just do it. This was back in 1990. You might have to go to college now. I don't know. I don't necessarily suggest. I really feel like it's a per person thing. If you feel like you need college, do it, but there's nobody checking your degree, especially for what I do. But college does help with connection. And that was the only bit of advice he gave. I never actually worked for him. He never introduced me to anyone, but here is how I made that happen. I kept in touch with all the drama kids I ever met, including ones that went to other schools. One of the girls was doing an internship at a local theater in downtown LA called the Los Angeles Theater. I was going to do an internship for me, but I got a traffic ticket instead, and I needed to pay for the traffic ticket and the insurance for my car because at that time I was uninsured. So I told the theater I was going to have to decline the internship and that I needed to work, and they were like, why don't you go downstairs and work in the subscription department? I went downstairs, and as I was cold calling future subscriber members of the theater, I was working next to this girl whose cousin was a costume designer. We got to talking, and I said, hey, I want to intern for your cousin. Literally about the next week, her cousin calls me. Her name was Donna O'Neill. Donna right now is a big-time Hollywood costume supervisor, but back then she was costume designing a little low-budget, non-union TV show called Shades of LA. So Donna calls me up one day and says, listen, my costumer needs a week off because they're doing some kind of commercial or something, and they're going to get paid real money instead of what we're paying, and I'd like to offer you $100 a day to work on set. And I was like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing. They're like, that's okay. We just need a body. And I'm like, okay, but can I still intern for you after? And she's like, of course you can work for free after that. So I worked for that week. I got a really silly story about one of the actors and accidentally walking in him while he was, let's just say, very indiscreetly dressed. That's another story. I did the internship, and when the show ended, I was like, I still feel like I know absolutely nothing. Now, my friend that introduced me to her cousin was going out of town, so I house sat for her. And while I was house sitting for her, her roommate, she really didn't need a house sitter, but her roommate was like, hey, I know this costume designer I worked with on a movie called Great Balls of Fire. The roommate was a child actor and was in that movie. So she gave me the costume designer's mailing address, and I sent her a letter. That letter went to New York. Then it went back to Burbank, where the costume designer lived, and then the costume designer called me on the phone. My name is Shay Cunliffe, and I am looking for an intern for a movie called Blood In, Blood Out. That movie was released as Bound by Honor. I ended up interning on that film, and I learned so much. Randomly, I also interned for like a few days on Of Mice and Men, because the costume designer also worked on that show as well. Now on Blood In, Blood Out, while we were wrapping, this girl, Zeka, said, hey, I want you to come work on this really low-budget movie. It was called Dr. Mordred. I kept working on a bunch of random things. I'd meet one person, they'd say, hey, come work on this. And I'd go work on that, and I'd learn a little bit more and a little bit more. I worked on a lot of really low-budget projects. It took about 4 years before I got into the union. Even when I got into the union, I didn't know many people, so I ended up taking a TV show down in Mexico called Shades of LA. Now on that show, I was the costume supervisor. The costume designer basically did all of it. It was just really a title. I was basically the set person, and I was literally like the only set person. That was until the costume designer got very sick, and I had to take over the show, and I was the costume designer for a couple months during the last part of the show. It was an adventure. I actually had to design, build shoes from scratch, build outfits from scratch, and we were also shooting in Mexico in a tourist town that had absolutely nothing. When I finally got back in town, I made friends with someone who was working on a TV show called Party of Five. I was only on Party of Five for like 2 seasons, and I was like, I'm done. I need to move on from this. So I did a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that was so bad that the director took his name off of it. It was called Coyote or Desert Heat or something. I'm not exactly sure when this was, but I went to this event at Western Costume. It was kind of a meet and greet where you get to meet all these different costume supervisors. It was there that I met Brenda Maben, and she called me one day and said, hey, I'm doing a sitcom. It was a pilot. It was either Kirsten Dunst or Claire Danes. I can't really remember. And then sometime after, I did Coyote Ugly. And then shortly after Coyote Ugly, I get a call from Brenda Maben. Brenda was supervising Gilmore Girls. I swear to God, when she called me on the phone, she said, I'm doing this little TV show. It's called Gibson Girls. And I could have sworn she said Gibson Girls. And I'm thinking, oh, it's a period piece, the Edwardian time period, the famous models. I'm like, sure, cool, that sounds like fun. I look in the TV guide and I see that the episode that aired was the one about Richard taking Rory golfing. And I was like, okay. I don't understand how that relates to the Gibson Girls, but whatever. Okay. I get to set. I meet Alexis. My job would basically be to take care of Alexis, and if I didn't get along with Alexis, then I wouldn't get the job. I got along with Alexis just fine, and I kept working on the show until the very, very end. Now, when the revival came out, I was like, Brenda, I don't really want to be on set. How about I supervise? So I had nothing to do with the design of the clothes, only how the actors wore them in the scene. My job was to maintain continuity and make sure that the actors were wearing the right thing at the right time. But I'm glad you liked the clothes. A lot of work went into it. Brenda Maben, who's the one that hired me as the costume supervisor, eventually during season 4 took over as the costume designer and continued to design the clothes all the way until the revival.